Hi guys. So this is my story. It's going to be part of it. It's going to come in a 2 or 3 part series. Now, the reason I don't know if it's a 3 part is because I do these videos impromptu. I do them based on my energy. And that's a component I teach in the 10 laws. Is a lot of times with codependency, we get real structured so that we can make sure we're doing everything right. Well, we don't thrive when we do that. What we do is we choke. We're like, I'm trying to be perfect, and nothing comes out. So I do these videos impromptu because it comes on energy. And I find that I do better from that angle, and I'm able to connect more effectively with you guys and be able to share what I'm really got here in my heart to put out there. Because that's another component we really struggle with when we're in the grasp of codependency, is sharing from here. Because sometimes we don't even know what's there, and sometimes when we do, we feel shame or we feel fear about it. And one of my big pushes in my life is to come from here first. And that's an active choice, because in the brain, we're conditioned to choose others first or to examine how we fit them and how to please them. Well, reversal of that is choosing yourself first. How do they fit me? It's one of my big questions I love to ask. How do they fit me? And then, what does my heart say? Right now, I want to share a bit about where I come from. Okay? So, codependency, like you've likely experienced, is something that you become aware of over time. But it's an event that starts really early on in our lives. Mine started, from what I can tell, around the age of 5, when I realized that I didn't fit in with the religious and social expectations of the culture I grew up in. Okay? I realized that my nature, the things I liked, the things I was interested in, didn't fit. And I interpreted that as being evil. There was something bad about me. And that conclusion led me to fear losing the love of my parents, losing the love of God, losing the love of the inclusion of my peers. And so I had to come to, so this happened around 5. I distinctly remember walking down the street and that conclusion clicking in my brain. I must be a bad person. God must not. He wouldn't like me for what I am. My parents aren't going to love me for what I am. And so this started setting me up for a negative self-view. My self-esteem started to become anchored in shame rather than in love. Now, both my parents struggled emotionally. My mother struggled a lot with anxiety and depression and with a sense of frustration and trauma in her life. And my father struggled to be connected, to be present, because of his trauma and of his schizophrenia. So what this did was it created this soft codependent culture, and it's not real discreet. When I say soft, not discreet, it's overt. When I say soft, it's hard to detect. The family looks normal. This is just the way it is. Because it's touching on love and it's touching on inclusion, but there's big gaps in the middle. Now, you've probably experienced some of this in some of your relationships, and this is actually pretty normal, because when we don't know what love is, and we're not born knowing what it is, we're not born understanding what a healthy relationship or bond or connection feels like. We're born needing connection and attachment to survive and then thrive. And so my parents didn't know what that was either, because they didn't get it. So I inherited their best effort. And that is a compassionate point of view. I mean, you do not have to apply it to your parents or to your abusers. I've come to a place in my path where I'm comfortable with that position, with their behavior and choices. But fundamentally, it was neglect. The sense of being loved, the sense of belonging and being understood, recognized, seen, valued for my presence. Emotionally, I don't recall feeling those things. Now, it's possible it happened, but it didn't happen to a degree where I registered it emotionally. Okay? So I'm practicing a principle here called ownership, because it is my feeling, it's my experience, it is mine. It is not someone else's to manage. Now, it may be an emotion, a reaction or a response to someone else's behaviors, like the poor parenting behaviors or neglectful parenting behaviors or the indifferent behaviors that I experienced growing up. But that doesn't make my parents responsible for what I feel. It makes them responsible for what they did. Okay? So this foundation of believing myself to be evil and bad, combined with a neglect of love, created a situation where I hated myself. The dynamic was just pure and utter disgust towards myself. And by the age of 8, I had developed an anxiety disorder, and I had attempted suicide. I went out into the forest and I planned a suicide. I didn't jump off the cliff, so it wasn't, I ran towards it, but I stopped because I'm like, I don't think it's high enough. I really hated my existence. When we would get the yearbooks, I would scribble my face out, or I would cut myself out. I would take pictures and stab them with scissors because I wanted to hurt myself, because I truly believed I was harmful, that my presence caused other people harm. And then my mother was diagnosed with brain cancer. In October of 88, I was 10. And she rapidly declined, and then she passed away on April 9th, 1989, a week before my 11th birthday. This moment, that this is one of those transformational times in life where the neglect that had been existing under the covers, per se, just in the shadows, became very overt. Mom's dead, so there's nobody there. The one person that would hold me when I was sick, the one person that would ask me how my day was, the one person that did any kind of investment in me was gone. And then there was just Dad. And Dad didn't have a capacity to mentally handle losing his wife and having to be a dad to 4 kids and deal with the schizophrenia that was in the background that nobody really knew was going on at that time. And then the religious context I grew up in started to infiltrate my thinking, because I grew up Mormon, and Mormonism has a concept of eternal family. And while that can be a powerful, motivating concept, it also can be a toxic one, because it inhibits our ability to grieve the loss of people, and it causes the culture and causes members in the culture to communicate things they think are loving that are actually really, really harmful. And I started getting these messages from the culture. I started receiving this sense that I was very selfish for needing my mother, that I needed to have more faith and get over my mother's death, and that I was selfish for grieving. And these messages, combined with my father not really checking in much, fed into this idea that I'm bad. And so that shame got really, really deep. And then a shift happened. My father married another woman, my stepmother. And at that point, I discovered something very powerful. I learned that if I did things a certain way, she would give me attention. She would give me affection. And if I did something wrong, she would withdraw it violently. Through stonewalling, through indifference, through verbal criticism or emotional manipulation. And this triggered an awareness in my brain. I suddenly understood that if I pleased people, I could get what I needed. And so I started doing that. I started pleasing her, I started pleasing my dad, started pleasing people at church, started pleasing my peers. And this world just suddenly stopped being antagonistic to me and started praising me. And this is where I got lost in codependency. Rather than dealing with my guilt, rather than facing my grief, rather than demanding support and love, I shut down. I cut myself off from my feelings. I turned off my rage, which really didn't work well because I had a lot of rage. I was neglected. The people were telling me toxic things and it was building up inside. I switched off my sense of self. I disconnected from my body and began to live in this fog in my life. And this fog got bigger and louder and more absorbing and swallowing. It just absorbed me, just took me into its world the older I got. And this led to some very, very, very serious problems. I attempted suicide again at the age of 19 while I was on a Mormon mission. I never dated women I was interested in. I avoided them because I felt so disgusting for the person I was. Why would somebody love me? Nobody else was. They just liked me for what I did. Because when I didn't do what they wanted, they withdrew their love. They threatened me with their love. That isn't love, guys. That's manipulation. I grew into a person that started using other people for my own needs. Some of the narcissism that my stepmother brought into the environment, some of the narcissism from the religious background, some of the narcissism from others bled into my own character, my own choices, and I started to use people for what I needed because I figured out how to manipulate them. And this led me to marrying someone that I wasn't in love with and creating a family that deserved more love and respect. But I didn't have the capacity to do that. And it was this step that woke me up. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next video, is what woke me up. But right now, where we're at right now, is my codependency had an origin in hating myself, believing that there was something wrong with me. And rightly so. I was being praised for what I did right growing up. But I honestly can't remember being told, I like you for who you are. I'm so grateful you exist. I keep you. I didn't get those messages, especially emotionally. You likely didn't either. So codependency is a result of that lack, of that neglect. Because we needed that. We needed to know we were valuable. Children build part of their identity off the reflection of their parents. That's normal. It's healthy. But when they're toxic, we internalize their neglect, their rejection, their criticism, their contempt as something wrong with us. And naturally we would, because they're the authority in our lives at that time. So, yeah, I've come to this place because of that kind of neglect. My experience with codependency and narcissism is the neglect spectrum. It's the indifference spectrum. I was praised for not being a burden, for not getting in the way. Good job, Marshall, getting over your mother's death. You've done so well. So happy you did that. And I got that from my parents, from my father and my stepmother. That's wrong. It's disgusting. That's the wrong message to send somebody, especially in their mother's death. We're so glad you got through your trials by yourself. See, that's one spectrum of narcissistic abuse, is the indifference, the discarding. You're not worth it. So you're only worth it to me when you do what I want. But otherwise, just go away and figure it out yourself. Marshall's fine. Marshall will figure it out. He's strong. He's smart. And that gives them this permission not to do their job as a parent. Further, I was told at age 12 I was responsible for taking care of Karen. My father told me that with his words. He won't remember it. They'll probably, well, we don't remember that. Maybe that happened, or they'll probably just deny it. But I was instructed I remember very clearly. We were at a store called Yellowfront in Flagstaff, where we live, Flagstaff, Arizona. And Karen had my stepmother had a seizure. And my father was like, don't you ever call the paramedics. You take care of it. Your job is to help take care of her. And I'm 12. And I'm just recovering from watching my mother die. And brain cancer gives seizures. You get seizures. Grand mal seizures and facial seizures and all sorts of fun things. And here is this woman having a seizure. But nobody's, thought to ask how I was doing. Scared the living hell out of me. That'd be fun. But that's another form of neglect. Nobody took time to consider my context and my needs. The people who should have done that didn't. And that is their failure. That is what they own. My feelings about it, which I still have some choppiness about, are mine to own. And when I ally with my feelings, I feel strong in me. When we cut off from our feelings, we become small and we become much, much more susceptible to their manipulation. So as we go through this course together, more of that story is going to come out. But I wanted to give you a premise of where I came from. And then now, in the next video, we're going to explore how I broke out of it. Okay? So thank you for watching. Let me know of any questions you have. I appreciate you guys. Take a moment and praise and appreciate yourself because you're worth it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of my circle, my tribe. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.